Amendment rights against self-incrimination. Is a corporation endowed by its creator with inalienable rights? Just last year, the court found that the Second Amendment right to bear arms is a personal right. If the court were determined that corporations had the same rights as persons, would corporations have the right to arm themselves? Would the lobbies of Fortune 500 companies contain grand weapon caches? The absurdity of the argument should be apparent to the members of the court. John Marshall, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, wrote in 1819 that corporations were, quote, an artificial being, invisible, intangible. Therefore, he stated, being the mere creature of law, it possesses only those properties which the charter of its creation confers upon it, either expressly or as incidental to its very existence. Essential to a corporation's existence is a First Amendment right to speak about their products and services. Essential to a corporation's existence is the right to sue for the theft of its intellectual property. Essential to a corporation's existence is the right to enter into contracts. Not essential to a corporation's existence is the ability to contribute unlimited funds to political candidates. It is for this reason and others that the Supreme Court has repeatedly and consistently upheld a ban on direct contributions to political candidates by corporations and unions. Chief Justice Roberts stated at one point during the argument in the Citizens United case that, quote, we don't put our First Amendment rights in the hands of FEC bureaucrats. I agree. And that's why the court has repeatedly upheld bans passed by the Congress of the United States and by the state legislatures on unlimited corporate or union spending in elections. Under current law, corporations are free to give to political candidates through political action committees. In an editorial in the Boston Globe entitled, quote, corporations aren't people yet, the editorial board rightly states, even under current finance restrictions, healthcare industry groups are pouring millions of dollars into congressional campaigns in the hope of thwarting reforms that might constrain their members. A September 10, 2009 editorial in the Philadelphia Inquirer stated, quote, allowing corporations to flood elections with their aggregate corporate wealth would place a heavy thumb on the scales of democracy. If a certain industry didn't like the way a senator voted on environmental regulations, for example, there would be nothing to stop that industry from dumping $20 million into the campaign of that senator's opponent. The editorial goes on to say, if the High Court rules now that corporations have the same political speech rights as individuals, average citizens will have that much more trouble being heard. The distinction between corporate speech and individual speech is clear enough, and the importance of limiting the undue influence of money in politics is significant enough that the court and all of them should leave well enough alone. I agree. In conclusion, the court should not overturn precedent and Congress' clear intent to limit corporate contributions to political candidates. In summary, there are three simple points that were raised by the court's consideration of the Citizens United case. First, whatever one thinks of a First Amendment right for corporations, it is not appropriate for a non-democratic branch of government to raise a question of the broadest scope at the last minute when such a question was not raised in the trial court and there's no ability to build a record. Congress is the most democratically elected branch of government and should be able to make laws that do not stand in the face of the Constitution, whether or not the members of the court would themselves support such legislation if they served in the elected branches of government. Secondly, the principle enshrined in law for many years was that corporations, because of their artificial legal nature and special privileges, including perpetual existence, pose a unique threat to our democracy. However, The current court seems poised to find that Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and others were wrong, despite there being no record built on this point in the case. In McConnell, there was a record built to support the decision. Here, the trial court never examined the idea of corporations having broad First Amendment rights. The court is reaching to find such a conclusion as part of the Citizens United case. Lastly, I stress again to my colleagues the implications of the decision the court may reach in this case. The court is considering a question that may lead to corporations being treated as persons under the Constitution, would allow a corporation to assert a Fifth Amendment right to refuse to testify under oath and to keep documents from lawful investigations, and would allow corporations to be subject to individual tax brackets. Are my colleagues prepared to provide such rights to corporations? Are my colleagues prepared to pass legislation that taxes corporations and persons at the same rate? If the court provides full First Amendment rights to corporations, there is no reason that corporations could not receive the benefits as well as the responsibilities of being a person. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote in the McConnell decision, and she said, I think with such accuracy, money, like water, will always find an outlet, and that the government was therefore justified in taking steps to prevent schemes developed to get around the contribution limits. Again, Justice O'Connor knew better than most jurists. As a former Arizona State Senator and Majority Leader of the Arizona State Senate, I hope and wish that the current court heeds the words of this brilliant jurist who had real-life experiences in politics. Mr. President, needless to say, I'm very concerned about the integrity of our elections should the Supreme Court rule to overturn the Austin decision. I sincerely hope that the justices will practice restraint and rule in a manner consistent with judicial precedent and the Constitution of the United States of America. I again want to, as I have on many, many occasions, thank my friend from Wisconsin, a man of courage and a man of integrity, and a man I've always proud to be associated with on issues such as these that are important to the integrity of the institution that we both try to serve with honor. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator